a temperature thing.
Oh, is it?
I don't know. Which still, marble.
Yeah, I don't know. And then I ruined that one. Look at the corner already because I put it on there. I ruined all the tables. Hey guys, welcome back.
Hey.
Look at our new setup.
I know.
So nice.
Living lavish.
Comfy.
Some real marble.
Yeah. That I already made a water stain on with my McDonald's Coke. Anyways, Bridget, you want to introduce our topic?
Yeah.
What do we got?
Today, I thought it would be a good topic to talk about why your dog doesn't listen to you. Because we hear pretty often, well, my dog only listens when you're here, meaning the trainer, or if your dog is listening to your significant other over you, or in situations, and not in others. So we thought that would be a good thing to discuss today.
Yeah, kind of the why is it happening, how to fix it, how do you end up getting to that point where it happens type of thing.
Yeah.
What do you think, Seamus?
So I think especially when there's two people in the household, there's always one person that the dog tends to be a little bit more aware of kind of what they're saying and everything. Mine is usually, it's the one that's super loving and giving all the treats and stuff. I find is the one that they almost take advantage of more. And so they are less like, and I think people get confused by that where it's like, well, I'm the one that's always giving him affection and treats and everything. It's like, but he still listens to the other person more. It's like, to me, it's because they kind of know that you're the sucker, you know? They know that they can get what they want. They can kind of work around you a little bit more. Whereas the other person's probably a little bit more strict with giving them the treats and freedom and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I've find a consistency with it. And, you know, easy solution is just saying you got to be strict too. You know what I mean? You got to not be so easy with them and everything. But, you know, especially if you're already kind of that person for the dog, it can be really hard for them to be that assertive figure again. But that's
you're kind of like fighting an upward battle at that point.
Right.
Because the precedent has like already been set. And then you have to double back on it.
I think a lot of people, like, they tend to want to be this, like, good cop, bad cop with the dog, right? Where it's like one person's super friendly and gives them, sneaks them the treats under the table and all that stuff. And then the other one's got to be, like, the firm
Setting
one.
down the law,
Exactly.
making the rules.
But, you know, if you're someone like that and you get kind of offended that your partner's has more control over the dog, then that's what you got to do. You know what I mean? You got to just be a little bit more assertive with it.
Yes, like not that you can't give your dog affection or love or have a loving relationship, but in the training process, we have to take a look at the big picture. And are we having trouble with the dog taking advantage of us in situations and we don't want to see that behavior? Then we may need to kind of have a reality check and see what do we need to change and how can our communication with our dog be better. And unfortunately, communication through affection is not training, you know? So.
If you're like leading with love,
Right.
and you think you can like win them over just by like, you know, being the one that gives them all of the good things.
They're
that's just
smarter
not
than
how
that.
dogs work.
No, they're so much smarter than that.
That's just not how it works. And I think like contextually a lot of times, because probably the biggest thing that we hear when, especially because most of the sessions we do are like at the facility here, like we do some in-home stuff and most of the time it's here. People will be like, oh, when we're here, the dog does really good. And does listen.
We hear that a lot too.
And listens, and then when we're at home, you know, they don't. And I think that I talk a lot about this in our group classes too, but I think it's because of a couple reasons. One, when you're here, literally the whole purpose of you being here is to work with your dog. So your 100% focus is on your dog. And so you're catching all of the little things, you know, and you're being very on top of your game. Whereas obviously at home, first and foremost, you're living your life, and then the dog is just a part of it, right? And sometimes people have a hard time like meshing the ability to like live their lifestyle and include proper management and stuff with their dogs in the process. And then I think the other piece is that we're not there, like, on your shoulder being like, you need to fix that. Did you release them from that bed stay?
Timing could be better. Levels could be higher.
Yeah. Missed opportunities that people just in their everyday life go through.
Yeah. So I think it's like, part of it is being realistic, because I think sometimes maybe people bite off more than they can chew at home. And they're like, oh, well, I'm committing to, if I can't do an hour of training a day, then I should just not do anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so then, because we're setting unrealistic expectations of ourselves and how to implement the training at home, it just doesn't end up happening at all. Rather than being like I always try to give my clients really easy, realistic ways of implementing stuff throughout the week that doesn't require like setting aside like a specific training session. Like, I think unavoidably there's times you have to do that. But like, once you get to a certain level, it's like, oh, well, you watch TV, do a bed stay.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, that's what I tell clients all the time.
Yeah, like stuff like that, where it's like very easy ways to implement it and start to be a little more consistent with it.
Like I always tell people, there's going to be a point where it's a lot less about quantity and more about the quality of the command.
Yes.
So there's going to be a point where you're not going to do like 25 reps or 30 reps like you do in your training sessions, because your dog is going to become more proficient with understanding the command.
Yep.
So then we just get like one really good 30-minute, 20-minute bed stay at dinner time, or when people are coming in, and we start to see the real life changes happening when we're incorporating into how we actually live with our dogs.
Yeah. Because repetition really is, I'd say the most, really the biggest reason we do a lot of repetitions in training is strictly to teach them the word paired with the behavior.
Exactly.
Just constantly over and over again, this word predicts you're going to do this behavior, just over and over again. So, like you said, once they know the word and the command, repetitions really aren't that important.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Something you need to keep like.
Like there might be certain times that, you know, maybe doing a specific exercise with lots of repetitions could help with maybe a certain behavioral thing you're working on, anxiety, you know, different things like that, sure. But when it really comes down to it, repetition is more so just about teaching the command. Once they know it, then it's like just tell them to sit once and make them hold it for 5 minutes and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Another thing I think that I've had a lot more recently is they come for a follow-up and they say, well, when they're here, they're really good. Or when the collar's on, they're really good.
Yeah.
But when the collar's off, then they
that's
don't
really
miss
the
it.
point to
Right?
bring up.
And that's another one where if you're using it as a teaching tool, and especially for the boarding trains, you know, where it's like they're almost catching up to the dog.
Yeah.
And especially in that first week or so, you know, the dog's looking really good from the facility and then transitioning. And that's where I really get like hard on the owner sometimes, and like, this is the most important week. Like, if you are not consistent in this transition from facility to home isn't smooth and good, then like consistent with it, then it kind of falls apart, right?
Yeah.
But it's also very hard for them sometimes because they're just getting their dog back after not seeing him for a month. They want to spend time with them. They see how good they are, so they kind of be a little bit more relaxed with it because they're like, oh my gosh, you are so good, so I probably don't need to put as much effort as like maybe I thought I had to at first. And so it kind of slacks back. But the Ecollar too is like, well, if it's not on, of course they're not going to listen because you're taking an essential tool used for teaching away, you know? Yeah. So...
Because you're breaking habits.
Right.
As soon as the dog, like, dogs create really strong pictures and associations with either people, things, whatever. And so it's like when they go home, if we piggyback off of your example with boarding trains, when they go home association, they don't naturally say, I'm going to take everything I learned and just do it here.
They're like, I'm back to the place that I missed.
Exactly. They're like, cool, I did that there. That doesn't happen here, you know? And so it's, you have to like actively, it's like if you're if you're going to put any effort into the training, it needs to be this week at the most. Because in the e-collar, I mean, we get that. I would assume you probably do as well. I think everyone would, even in private lessons. I'd say lesson like 6 to 8 out of 10 is usually when people will bring up like, they're doing really good, but I've noticed that if the collar isn't on, that's when they're not listening or things like that. And again, it's just kind of a conversation of the collar cannot be situationally used until all of the habits are like firmly either broken and then established at that point. And even with young dogs, like if you're raising a dog, I think that you need to have whatever your communication or reinforcement system that you're using needs to be in place and accessible at least until the dog is fully mature.
Yeah.
Because like you could think like if you started training a dog at 5 months old, by 7 months old, you really could have an off-leash, fully trained dog, but you're right before maturity.
Yeah.
So again, just because you have all the skills and the training in place, that doesn't eliminate some genetic nature, things that might change. And if you're like, cool, then I don't need the e-collar at home anymore or in these certain situations because the dog's been doing great, you might run into an issue where the dog's going through all these changes and then now you don't have a way to help them understand how to navigate that and what's okay and not okay.
Right. I always, whenever I'm training a puppy, always tell the owners that. You know, I always come at it as like their teenage phase. You know, they're if it's a male and they're unneutered or something, and or even if it's just a female, whatever. Like as they grow and mature, there's going to be different stages of just chemical balances and you know genetics, like you were saying, that are going to change the dog. You know, just like it changes people, you know? So it's something where, they can have the structure, but as it gets older, you know, they might start kind of pushing those limits a little bit more, being kind of top dog, as you would say, you know what I mean? So it's something,
puppy is turning into a teenager stage.
And that's exactly what happened to Sully. It was like, Sully was really good, and he was off leash, and he was awesome, and then he got like around 2 years old, and that's when we started having the issues with like socialization and stuff again. And so it was like, so it's something where I kind of had to like take a step back, evaluate, kind of work with him back kind of into it. And so like he's just now at a little over 3 years old now, just starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it and kind of back into socialization. But I mean that is definitely something that took me a minute to kind of like, even for me to kind of like understand and work with. But.
Well, and I think it's important to note too that like, because a lot of times, obviously we talk about like doing training young and early because you can avoid a lot of potential problems that way. But I do think it's easy to fall into the trap where like, if you do everything right and then you still run into like an issue with your dog as they get older and mature, some people get kind of defeatist to be like, well, then what was the point? Like, I did all this training and my dog's still having this issue or this problem or whatever. It's not a magic wand. It doesn't like change who the dog is. But the difference is that you now already have a pre-existing language and communication set up that, again, you can help them navigate what they're going through and help them figure it out.
It can be easier to kind of curb those behaviors as they grow older. Whereas like, you know, unfortunately with like a lot of rescues and stuff, they have these years of like
rehearsing
these rehearsing these issues or behaviors that it's obviously harder to curb those behaviors or to eliminate them. But like you're saying, like puppy, it's like you can hopefully try to get some of those out of the way, but
for sure,
genetically stuff is going to happen, you know, with certain dogs. And so, having that structure presented before those become a big thing in maturity, you know, we're able to kind of curve it around a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, and you're like setting up, in the training process, you're setting up a communication system with your dog. And if we falter, whether that's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, whatever methods we use, if we change the way that we're communicating to our dog, we can see the dog's behavior change, where they're not as attentive to us. And that comes down to like we were raising them with speaking Spanish. and then all of a sudden we're speaking English to them, is how I equate it. It's kind of like we've set up a language, and if we change that language, the dog's like, what?
Yeah.
And we're like, how could you act like that?
Uh-huh.
And they're like, I don't understand what you want from me.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important. So it's like until, and with the training tools and stuff, and it really doesn't even, obviously like Ecollars are a large portion of tools that we use here, but like when it ultimately comes down to it with my clients, I'm like, life happens. Sometimes you're not going to have the e-collar on. I get it. But you have to live in a way that you're being mindful of that. Because it's like, if you don't have the e-collar on, you really, and especially in these like limbo stages of training where your dog still kind of has a proclivity to go towards old habits that we don't want, or not listening because we haven't enforced and made the commands habitual. Like if I'm at my house and Lumos is in my backyard and he doesn't have his e-collar on, I'm not nervous to say come, because I know he's gonna listen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's 9 years old. Like he's at the point where like even if he was chasing something, if I said come, he's going to listen. And I'm really confident in that. I would never trust that in an uncontrolled environment. Not trust it, but I would never risk it, probably is a better way to put it. But like with Snoop, for instance, I'm very picky about, because he's younger and he's been trained far less amount of time, I'm very picky about giving him commands when I'm not in a position to really make sure he's going to do it. Because he doesn't have the muscle memory that Lumos does. When I say come to Lumos, it's like he doesn't even consciously choose. He's just like, woo, because that's just, it's been ingrained in him for so long. So routine. So it's like, yes, you're not going to have the e-collar on all the time. I get that. But then you need to be mindful of, instead of saying come, maybe we do something informal, like, come here, buddy. You know what I mean? Or something like that.
One of those indirect commands.
Exactly. Or if you need to deliver a correction, there's plenty of ways to give a correction that aren't the e-collar. You know what I mean? And so if you need to deliver a correction, then maybe that's just a pop on the collar. Maybe it's a pet corrector. Maybe it, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways to do it. So it's really, I try to get them less off of the idea of being hung up on the e-collar being this big piece of everything, and more about just overall, you just need to be consistent and aware of what you're doing with your dog. You don't want to be caught where you're in a situation where you can't do anything.
And they're learning to quite literally blow you off, because they're like, there's no repercussion for me not listening. Like, sometimes I get a treat and sometimes nothing happens. I don't get a correction. And they're like, this is great.
Yep, exactly.
We've noticed that a lot with like Pipsqueak. As you guys know, I've been working on conditioning a recall and having her come. But every now and then she'll slip her little way under our couch. And it's very difficult to get her back because she loves under the couch. It's her little cave. In that moment, I've just stopped trying to recall her, and I'll go under the couch, I'll pick it up, and I'll physically get her. Rather than being like, come! And then getting frustrated with her because she's not coming.
Absolutely. And then what you're doing is you're just, if you were to say come in those moments and she doesn't listen and you can't enforce it in any way, then again, you're just teaching her that she can escape commands and not listen. And that can get really dangerous. And so that's even another situation, like I've had clients with a similar issue where I'm like, okay, then your dog, you either need to do what you just described, or they need to either be wearing a leash if they're not going to have any other enforcement on. So that way you can at least grab the leash and get them out.
Drill that specific scenario up, because when you go to do it organically and it's happening naturally, we can be caught off guard or we're not prepared as to if I pop that leash on her and we go near her couch and she starts to dip under it, I can say come, and I'm in a position to physically get her to me and kind of go from there. So we're having less failures and more successes.
So I think really kind of what it comes down to when it's like, oh, well, my dog listens to another person, listens in this context but not in this context. I mean, if your dog listens in one context but not another, they clearly can do it. And that's kind of what I always tell people when they mention it here. They're like, oh, see, they can do it when you're around. I'm like, well, then they can do it.
Right.
If they can do it here, they can do it there. Yeah. The only reason, and usually I'll ask them, I'll be like, so why do you think it's not happening at home?
Yeah.
You know, and they know the answer. They know the answer.
Yeah.
So, but then it's our job, you know, to come up with ways that are realistic to help them change it. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, so I take their dog on a walk here, the dog doesn't react. Or even they're handling the dog and me just being here for whatever reason, the dog doesn't react. And they're still struggling with that at home. It's like, okay, so then let's dissect what are you doing at home to begin your walk? Because most likely in those situations, it's things where like, as we're going out of the facility to go outside on our walk, I have to remind them, oh, correct him because he just went through the door ahead of you without permission. Yeah. Oh, fix that position, he just walked ahead. So it's all those little tiny things that I'm telling you to do, so you're doing it, and then magically our walk is really good. When at home, it's probably all those little tiny things that you're just not really cognizant of.
Or people are like, that detail doesn't matter. Like,
yes.
I just had that, I just did an in-home session with a very reactive shepherd, and he said, I cannot walk on this trail with my dog, it goes ballistic. And we got the dog on the trail, and instantly passed 3 or 4 dogs, and the dog was like, I'm not reacting to anything because I have the leash. Yeah, and then I gave the leash to him, and we did the exact same process, and the dog flipped out at a dog. And he was like, why does she listen to you and not to me? And I said, I've never had a relationship with this dog that she's been able to pull me down or jump on me or have this really unhealthy, toxic behavior because she's never known anything else from me than structure and guidance and training. Yeah. And I don't let her get away with all those little details. So we went over that, and I, instead of taking the dog back, because that's what people want you to do, they're like, take it back, you handle it. It's like, no, you have to practice working through this on your own, because there's going to come a time where I'm not there to watch you over your shoulder. I had to work through it, and the dog had another reaction, but it was so much less severe and intense. And that's what I want to see is this improvement, because we're teaching people to handle these situations on their own.
I mean, people shouldn't, I don't want to have to, as much as I would love to hang out with my clients and their dogs forever, I don't want to have to do that. My job is to get you to be very self-sufficient, where even if down the line you run into a problem, you don't need me. You know what to do. You know how to fix it. You know how to work through that stuff. Because you shouldn't have to feel like you're relying on the trainer forever to know how to do everything. That means that they're not giving you the tools to be able to just see a problem, assess it, and know how to problem solve it. You know, and figure out how to get there.
It's like raising a little baby bird. Like you nurture it and you teach it, and then eventually it's like, bye. Fly
Well, and arguably, listen, it's not that dog trainers are just these magicians. The dogs like listen to us beautifully every time. Arguably, honestly, and truthfully, it's so much easier for us to get your dog to listen to us because we have no context beyond that. Like,
our relationship is solely built off of the structure and not the emotion.
Exactly. You are fighting a much tougher battle with your dog than I am.
Yeah.
Even if your dog hates my guts in the beginning, it's so much less nuanced than what you as the client are going to have to do.
Absolutely.
And the journey of it, because they already have, again, the associations built up with you, the muscle memory of ignoring you, or the muscle memory of guarding you, or, you know, like these pictures rehearsed a million times of when I'm with my owner and I see a dog, I lose my mind.
Right.
They do that with me one time, I correct it, and they're like, oh, okay.
So that's not how we roll.
Yeah, so, I mean, we totally understand that, like, you guys have it way harder, you know, dealing with your own personal dog. Not to mention you have the emotional investment in the dog, and, like, that plays such a huge part in being able to follow the plan we set up. Because, of course, it's easy for me to tell you, oh, you need to correct your dog at this level for doing this thing, and you need to do this, blah, 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 and it's going to look a little bit rough, but it's important, and we're going to get through this stuff. And then for you to have to set aside the, like, years of like babying and coddling, and you know what I mean? Like it's tough. It's really tough.
Habits
and it's natural for people to feel that way, and they shouldn't be shamed. And like some other trainers will be like, well, you're not being tough enough, you're not being strict enough. And you have to like sometimes stand in the client's shoes and be like, I'm a dog lover myself, I'm a dog owner myself.
Yeah.
And if 10 years ago you were telling me to correct one of my dogs and they were going to have maybe a little bit of a reaction, I'd have been like, no.
Yeah. Who are you to tell me that?
Yeah, and then you start to see all the changes that's happening with your dog, and you're like, oh, this plan is working, and eventually getting to a point where we don't have to be so on top of our dogs and we don't have to correct them. Like with Lumos, your example of having him come to you has just been conditioned, and you don't have to get super correction all the time drill sergeant with him.
No, not at all. Yeah, so, and I think another piece too that's important to note is that in like a multi-person household, if there is one person that the dog generally respects and listens to better, it can be very easy to fall into a habit where, say the dog listens to me better, you're trying to tell it to do something, it's not listening, I step in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
And all that does is further reinforce to the dog that like it's not that serious until that person comes in.
When your father gets home, or when
your
mother gets home.
Yeah, my mom was not that lady.
Yeah.
She was not a wait till your father gets home.
She's like, I'm going to do it right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. You got to be scared of me, too.
She was just as terrifying, honestly. So you want to make sure that you're not falling into that trap where you're either allowing or expecting the other human in the household to come stand up for you.
Yeah.
With kids, it's different. I'm talking about like adult relationships with the dog and stuff. But yeah, that needs to be like, there is a relationship issue there with that person and that dog, and they have to be the ones to address it. You know,
your dog has to respect the handler that is giving the command and not be hand off constantly. Be like, you do it, you make the dog listen.
Yeah, because there are some, I kind of term them like user friendly. There's some dogs that are very user friendly, and they, once a communication system has been established for them, they kind of listen to most people. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, whatever, that's fine. Maybe they would need enforcement every once in a while. And then you have those dogs that truly, every single person that tries to tell them to do something, you have to prove to them that you're going to make them do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like my shepherd, he's not just like, Seamus, you could probably walk up to him and be like, sit, and he would still probably look at you like,
so
who are you?
Do it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, what? You know? So it's like, is it because he doesn't know sit? No, he knows sit. It's just he doesn't know you.
Right.
And so every single person that's interacted with him has to either decide, do I just want to not tell this dog to do anything, or do I want to actually try to make an effort to make sure he respects me in the process of it? You know? So that's a big piece of it too, is that even if they know the communication system, I think there was a clip from a vlog or something that they just posted too, basically saying the same thing, that anyone interacting with the dog needs to know that system and needs to know how to enforce it if the dog ignores them.
So whether that's like a pet sitter coming into your house or a family member watching your dog, doesn't have to be like your dog has to be super proficient with all of their commands with that person, but we need to have the communication in place so that they can get your dog in and out of the crate. They can get your dog outside on a leash, and not, if your dog struggles with reactivity, that's not being displayed, or those behaviors aren't being rehearsed with that person. So it takes a little bit of going over with the people that are going to be caring for your dog, whether it's family member, anybody in the dog's life.
And I think your point too of like making it, maybe they don't have to be able to do everything, you know, that your dog knows, or implement all of that, but you can pick and choose like the main things, you know, that are really important. Like, I want the dog to respond well to going in and out of the crate. I want those manners good, and I want you to be able to walk them on leash. You know what I mean? Like, maybe those are the big things you do, and that's it. They don't really need to know anything else.
It's interesting to like also to go back to our point of like the emotional side of things. It's always interesting to be that third party especially with couples that have dogs that they've struggled with, and sometimes there's a little bit of argument over the situations with the dogs, And it's nice to be that third party to observe and kind of be the common ground. Like, this is what you guys need to do.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed being able to offer that guidance to people when they are struggling, or they're like, no, we got to do it this way. No, we got to do it this way. And getting people on the same page is so essential to a dog's success.
Yeah.
And being like, I don't know if you guys agree, but the good cop, bad cop thing can actually be pretty damaging to your dog, because if there's no consistency behind it. So while we think we're being nice in the good cop, we're actually causing a lot more confusion with the dog, which is not fair.
Right.
Yeah, because sometimes behaviors are permissive, and then sometimes they're not, and you know.
Getting on the couch, getting in the bed. Sometimes, like,
Exactly.
Dad will let you on the bed, but Mom doesn't want you on the bed, or vice versa, or whatever. And it's just like that.
Yeah.
Leads to that confusion.
Oh yeah, and I would say too that the people that tend to be the more permissive are causing more damage.
Yes.
They're the ones that are tending to cause the most damage, because it's easy to be the one that breaks the rules and allows the dog to indulge in the things that it wants to, whether they're unhealthy or not. And then of course that makes it even harder for the person who's trying to enforce the rules, because now the dog has this picture in its mind of like, sometimes yes, sometimes no. You know what I mean? And they kind of waver back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect way to create anxiety.
It's like it emotionally, like,
if you want an anxious dog, that's how to do it.
And it feels good to be able to like slip your dog the extra snack, or like, oh, let's give him his second chance. And that feels good, because we feel like we're providing something for the dog. And then the person providing the rules has to like suffer the consequences of the dog acting up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's
for
not
sure.
fair to your significant other.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Yeah, it is interesting how much conflict dogs can create in people's relationships.
Sometimes you feel like you're like a little bit of a marriage counselor, relationship counselor.
Communication is key.
Yes. But again, like, I agree with you, Bridget, that like it can be so helpful to just have an objective third party, even if that person is saying everything you've been saying for years to your partner, and for whatever reason they just don't want to listen to you, but now they're listening to the dog trainer. Like, maybe they just needed to hear from somebody else. You know what I mean? I think probably relationships always struggle with pieces of that in every aspect.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I could tell my husband that he needs to stretch more for years, and then if one of his friends was like, dude, I've been stretching and it's been great, he'd probably be like, amazing, maybe I should do that.
Now don't watch this.
But yeah, sometimes you just like, when people are too close, you know what I mean? It can like cause friction, even if what you're saying is factual.
Well, and it's something, and you know, if the one person is right or whatever, sometimes the trainers in the situation of dog training stuff have a little bit more of a reason to back up it, instead of just being like, the dog's not allowed on the couch, and they're like, no, they are, and it's like, no, they're not, like it's bad for the training, whatever. Sometimes they don't really know like the whole reason behind it, or the problems that can be because of it and everything. So their justification or their rule isn't as justified, right?
Yeah.
But then the trainer come in and be like, well, this is why it's probably not as good if you have guests over, kid, whatever, blah, 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 resource guarding. And so then it's like, oh, okay. So you were right, but you just didn't know why you were right.
It goes from like, that's your preference, to like, oh, like that's just really the right way to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, and that I've actually had clients recently that were like, they even said that like their marriage concerning the dog has improved, because they're like, I'd be Googling and he'd be Googling, and we'd both come up with different answers, and then we're like, well, why is yours right and mine is wrong? And then it would be like this whole thing, and they're like, you know, the first week you told us to stop Googling and just ask you things from now on. They're like, and that's just been so much more simpler. Because it's like, maybe none of those things were wrong, but you can't do 50 million techniques and expect it to work.
Yeah, you have to, like, well, a highlight recently that I've had was I had a very nervous shepherd and went to the vet, and it was awful, and they had a very emotional visit where they left feeling absolutely defeated, and there was a lot of coddling from both parties. at the vet, they read, oh, give the dog a lot of treats at the vet. Give the dog a lot of cheese, something high value. And this dog cannot be touched by the vet, to the point the vet said, this dog cannot come back unless it's completely sedated. So I went to an appointment with them, and we got the dog into a down, and that's the only criteria we held. She got corrected one time for having an explosive reaction when the stethoscope, they were listening to her heart, she was like, and one correction, and the rest of the time we were able to do the vaccines, the shots, the blood draw, and the dog was completely fine. And they were like, how? And I was like, we don't emotionally coddle this dog.
Yeah,
and
we know the dog can do it.
Yeah, both of them were feeding into it, and both of them said we were Googling back and forth, and I was like, next time just give me a call.
Yeah.
Which they did.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of, I was talking to somebody the other day, I was like, being a good dog trainer has a small amount to do with dogs. A relatively small amount. Like, you mainly need to be just a good people person.
Yes.
You need to be able to connect with people and communicate well and, like, stuff like that, because that's the biggest piece of the success, is getting people to want to do the things that are going to work, even when it doesn't always feel good to do it. You know?
Trust the process, and if the trainer feels right to you, lean on them for a little bit of support if you're unsure about things, because we're always here to help you, back you up if you have any questions or nuances, behaviors come up, that's what we're here for.
And that's the one thing I always tell owners and stuff is I love my job because I love working with dogs and with people and stuff. So it's something where I want to see the dog succeed just as much as the owners do, right? Even if it's just a puppy issues to a dog that has bite risk and everything like that, I want to see them succeed just as much. So it's if you need that help, like you were saying, I want to get to a point where you feel confident in yourself to deal with those issues and do it. But in terms of teaching, especially in board and trains, you're catching up to the dog at first, So coming to me for all these questions and stuff, and when you are feeling defeated and you feel like it's just not what it was in the scent home and everything, it's that's happens every single dog. Obviously they're going to be different because the transition, they're going back to that household where they could get away with stuff. So I think it's something that, having that kind of aspect of making sure that you have a trainer that you can trust and know that is there for you.
Nobody's going to judge you or make you feel stupid or small or unworthy.
Yep. If you're working with somebody like that, there's plenty of other people you could work with that are like that. Yes. There's no place for that.
That's when you can Google.
Or bullying people.
Yeah. Google better dog trainers near me. But yes, so if you're struggling in any capacity with a dog who in certain contexts doesn't listen as well, with certain people doesn't listen as well, that just means that we need to evaluate what we're doing and how we're communicating with the dog. In what areas are we being a little bit too lenient? In what areas are, we not enforcing things, stuff like that. Making sure, I know that being the one, even in my own household, me being the main dog person, there are times where my husband's trying to get the dog to do something that it's easier for me to just be I'll just do it. And it's I have to intentionally take a step back and be he needs to do it. Because even the dogs are looking at me can you believe this guy? So it can be easy to be that person that just oversteps a lot. And so sometimes it's good to take that step back too. But all right. Any other last thoughts? You like that? It's great. It's a great noise. All right. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Hope it helps.
Good luck out there.
Bye.